Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dylan Cruz, and I'm really excited to share how we went about building our multi-agentic DBT development workflow, and I know that is quite a mouthful, so why don't we just dive right into it. As I mentioned, my name is Dylan Cruz. I'm a principal architect here at Mammoth Growth. I have over a decade of experience in data engineering consulting. I was an early adopter of DBT many years ago, and I'm really proud to share the work that my team and I have been working on for the better part of this year. Here at Mammoth Growth, we are a boutique data consultancy. We do specialize in marketing and customer data, but really that just means that we work with our clients to define and analyze the metrics that are important for their business to grow. Every single one of our engineers is DBT certified, and we even have a newly minted DBT architect. I do have an exciting agenda for you here today. We're going to talk about the problem that we see time and time again at every single one of our clients, how we went about solving that problem, the impact that we've seen on our process in our business. We'll wrap up with some next steps and some learnings, and then we can discuss any questions that you all may have. Awesome. So I'd like to think that this is a safe space. We're all analytics engineers, data engineers, architects, so I'm going to be vulnerable with you all here for a moment and confess that I have not written a single line of code by hand in the last 6 months. And maybe that's not that shocking to a lot of you here today, but it's also not because I'm not delivering high-quality work on every single one of my projects. In fact, I'm pushing more PRs than ever. I'm getting value to my clients faster than ever. And the code that I'm pushing is more documented, more thorough, and more tested than, honestly, I should even admit. But we also know that's not always the case. In fact, a lot of the teams that we work with are fighting an uphill battle. Right now, data teams struggle to move at the speed of business, and business moves so quick nowadays. I'm sure you all are very familiar with this similar scenario where you have an exec who lobs over a request while you're trying to understand exactly what they're asking for. You're maintaining the current pipelines. You have an engineer that quits. You have to onboard a new engineer. And by the time you finally get around to building out that data lineage, the opportunity window has closed. The business has moved on to something different. They want to analyze something new and shiny, right? We've all been there. But we also know that there's outside dynamics that are taking these weeks of development and turning them into months of development. First, requirements are constantly changing. You talk with one exec, they want to analyze ARR. You talk to the next stakeholder, they want to analyze churn. By the time you finally get them in the room to align, well, now they want to analyze customer retention. At the same time, resources are being constrained. Data teams are getting smaller, budgets are getting slashed, so teams are expected to do more with less. And that leaves a lot of data teams having to make this difficult decision between speed and quality. Do we pump something out the door quick enough and maybe add a little tech debt to our backlog in the hopes of returning to it in the next sprint, which we all know rarely happens? Or do we take our time and build something the right way and risk missing that opportunity window for the business? And so we felt this pain across every single client that we worked with. And so we knew that there had to be a better way to deliver that business value before the business changed their mind, before the requirements changed yet again. And so we knew there had to be a better way than manual DBT development. And so that's what we started to dive into earlier this year. And at the same time, companies like Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google released some of the most advanced AI that the world has ever seen. Clippy. No, I'm just kidding. And I built this deck about 6 months ago, so if you were at the keynote last night, the fact that Clippy is in both decks is a total coincidence. But they released the first ever reasoning models. And what this meant was now LLMs could take complex problems and break them down into logical steps. And this is where we really started to see the accuracy and the reliability of coding with AI start to increase. Now, it wasn't perfect, but it was absolutely getting better. And so this is where we started to dive in. Again, can we use AI to deliver more value to our clients quicker? And the obvious answer, of course, but we wanted to know how. And the big thing that you need to understand here is that these models, they aren't Clippy, right? They can deeply understand the context of your data. They can understand the difficult requirements and business logic that we need to put into these data lineages. And most importantly, they can adhere to our coding standards and our specific patterns of how we develop DBT, or your organization's patterns. And so that was our hypothesis. If these companies can leverage AI to write 20, 30, 40% of their code with AI, why can't we use AI to develop 100% of our DBT code? And so we got all of our engineers and architects in the room, and we started to throw up sticky notes of all the tasks that we do day in and day out when we work on DBT projects, right? Defining the sources, building out our bronze, silver, and gold models in our medallion architecture, updating snowflake permissions, right? All these things that you all do on your projects as well. And we started to ask, which of these tasks can we start to automate or agentify? And our first little aha win was our CTO built a little agent to take the unused columns from a bronze model. So if it wasn't selected downstream in a silver or gold model, it took out those columns, updated the documentation, and pushed a PR. That was our first little agentic win. Not that high value, but really exciting to see come to life. And so we took it a step further, and we built out a swarm of highly specialized agents that mirror the roles on our team. So we have the orchestrator, who's kind of like the quarterback of this workflow. He manages the workflow between all of the other agents. We have the analyst, who does all those data discovery tasks that we have to do on every single project. So querying the raw data to understand the relationships, the nuances, the overall cleanliness of the data that we're about to work with. And then the architect, who's kind of like the brains of the operation, who takes our detailed tech specs and breaks them down into milestones and checklists for the AE agent to follow. And then, of course, the AE agent, with his fancy little DBT shirt there, who writes, documents, and tests this production-grade code up to our standards. So not a bad-looking team, right? So let's double-click into this. So our analyst agent uses the dbt show command to, again, query that raw source data to understand the nuances, the relationships, the primary and foreign keys between tables, and documents all that into a highly concise markdown file for our other agents to use in their context. The architect agent, again, the brains of the operation, takes these detailed tech specs and breaks them down into these checklists using our best practices for SQL, uses code examples, and really is so explicit in what the AE agent should be building. And then, of course, the AE agent, who uses the dbt build, run, test, show command, all the commands you all know and love, to write this code, to document it, to test it, iterate on it until it's perfect, and then push that to production. Of course, the dbt MCP, which I know you guys have heard a lot about this week, is at the center of this workflow. It's really the glue that holds this whole workflow together. It allows our agents to build the models, to test the models, and iterate on them until they pass all the tests, all autonomously without our intervention. And now the first time that we were able to see an agent write a model, it tested it, it failed all the tests, it went, queried the data, updated the model, and then ran all the tests again. So it fixed itself. It was kind of like, it was more exciting than seeing your kids take its first steps. Now, I don't have kids, I'm just imagining, but it was really exciting to see. And so we reimagined our entire analytics engineering workflow with AI and dbt at the center. So again, just to reiterate, our architect takes these tech specs, breaks them down into checklists and milestones. Our analyst uses the dbt show to understand that raw source data. The AE agent builds, tests, and documents it, and then pushes to our human to PR review it and make sure it's ready for production. So pretty cool workflow. Well, after all of that, it still sucked. It still wrote crap code, right? And if you've coded with AI and LLMs, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It would select fields that just did not exist. It would hallucinate, and it would be nice if those fields existed, but they just did not. It would add extra columns that we did not specify. Again, we're writing these specs. We expect the agent to follow them to a T, and so when it starts to add extra columns, we know it's going off the rails. One of its favorite tricks was taking two metrics in a table and making a percentage of them. It would do it all the time. Not that useful, so we wanted to get rid of that. And then arguably, most importantly, it was writing SQL that does not adhere to our company standards. We're very picky with how we write our dbt and our SQL, and so when it starts to write code that we would never push to production, or we see code that it would write that our engineers would never write, we knew that something was wrong. And so you can see in this example, it's selecting from this gnarly subquery. It's just not code patterns that we adhere to. And so we took a step back, and we knew we needed to align the three key variables when working with agentic workflows: the model, the context, and the prompt. The model being the LLM behind the scenes. We've settled on Anthropic for the time being, but I really think you can swap that out for any of them nowadays. I really think it's kind of an even playing field, but that wasn't the variable that we wanted to pull on. Our prompts were highly concise. We were starting to see repeatability with them, so again, we felt pretty confident with moving forward with them as is. Of course, we can update the prompts along the way as well. And so we really knew the variable we needed to work on was the context, the knowledge and information available to that agent at runtime. But getting the right context in a data project is actually quite difficult. We see there's kind of 3 pillars of context that the AI agents need when working with data. First is the code base. Are there any current models or prior art that the agent can reference so it knows how to build? And that's assuming it's not a net new project, which in consulting, every single one of our projects is rather net new. We're setting up DBT for our client for the first time. So we need to make sure it understands how we build our DBT projects, how we design our medallion architecture, and all those best practices that go into that. The second is the business context. All the requirements and transformation that we need to put into these data lineages. And so this context exists in an exec stakeholder's head somewhere. It exists in 14 different spreadsheets somewhere, or a system UI. And so we need to extract all of that context and provide it to these agents. So again, they have the same knowledge that our engineers and architects do on the project as well. And then finally, the data itself. How many times have you gathered the requirements from a stakeholder and you think you know exactly what you need to build? And then you get inside the data warehouse and you realize, well, that source data is not available. This data is dirty and needs renaming. You have to do 100 different steps before you can even start to work with the data, right? So the agent needs to know that as well. It needs to understand that source data that it's about to build on. And so we knew we needed more context than ever before. On the technical side, more coding best practices and examples and templates for them to follow. Agents do very well when they have an explicit template to fill in. And then on the business side, tech specs, more business requirements, and we even went as far as all of our meeting transcripts, right? And so again, we took a step back and revamped our entire workflow with the end goal of gathering as much context for our agents as possible. So while our human experts and consultants and architects are having those requirement gathering discussions, we pass all those transcripts and information to an agent to build out our business use case documents, who passes all that context to our architect and architect agent to design exactly what we want to build. And all that context, again, gets passed to that coder agent to build and deploy. And so this snowball effect from gathering requirements all the way into this code execution, that's all just about gathering the right context. And so this is where we started to see the agents stay on the rails, as we call it, where it's actually starting to perform exactly how we expect. So now all of our agents from day one have our design guides, our documentation rules, our linting rules, our PR templates, all of our coding standards for how our engineers write code baked into it from day one. And so this is where we started to see them write the production grade code that we felt comfortable pushing to a production environment. So now we have our best practices ingrained, we have our concise prompts, and we have this massive context hydration, and here's where we're starting to see those repeatable results that we were hoping for. But everything works in development, right? Everything's fine and dandy, and then you go into production, and everything tips over and starts to burn. And so we knew we needed to battle test this in production. And so we found a client that was gracious enough to work with us to test out this agentic process. And we were able to enable the first use case in their data warehouse in just 3 weeks. I'm talking from handshakes and signatures to standing up a new Snowflake environment to delivering 2 gold models for them to build Tableau dashboards on in just 3 weeks. Now, if my boss had come to me, and he just so happens to be sitting here front row, and he said, Dylan, I need you to build out an enterprise-grade data lineage in just 3 weeks, I would have laughed, right? It's just not feasible. But it's exactly what we did. We built out about 15 data models in our medallion architecture with, again, those 2 gold models to replace some of their old Tableau dashboards in just 3 weeks. And so when I talk about moving at the speed of business, this is what I mean. When I talk about claiming that value for the business before that opportunity window, this is what I mean. Now, I don't want to set a precedent that execs can expect every single use case in just 3 weeks, because it's not feasible, but this is real and it is happening today. And now we still followed our same process, but as you can see, we still spent the same amount of time on planning, so gathering the requirements, building out our use case documents, building out our tech specs exactly as we always do on our normal projects. But that code execution happens so much faster because the agents can write, they can do it in parallel, they can iterate themselves. And so we saw what would normally about to take 10 weeks took just about 3 weeks. So it was very exciting. And so just to iterate, I think you guys get the point here, but just to paint the picture, While our human experts and architects and consultants are gathering the requirements, we have the analyst agent doing that data discovery that we all have to do when we onboard a new data set, right? So it's mapping the relationships, understanding which columns we need to clean up, and documenting all of that. All of that context gets passed to our architects, human and agents, to build out these detailed tech specs. And we knew exactly what we wanted to build. We needed these 15 models in the medallion architecture, so we made explicit tech specs for that. We passed that to the agent to build, document, and make sure that everything is tested. And so I'm sure a lot of you are at similar spots in the agentic journey here, but I wanted to share some of the learnings that we found along the way. Now again, I think this is a safe space. I hope it's still a safe space. But I wanted to admit another thing, and that's I delete entire code bases every single day. Now, that sounds dramatic. What do I mean by that? Well, we've coined something here at Mammoth called the reset paradox, where we believe the fastest path forward is often stopping, deleting what didn't work, updating your spec, and starting from zero. So we truly do believe that the output of the agents is directly proportional to your specification quality. So if you do have gaps in your specification, that's where the LLMs can start to go off the rails, start to infer what it thinks you want, and just starts to build stuff that we absolutely don't want. And so the more that you're vibing with these AI agents and these LLMs, the context window gets clouded up, right? It starts to kick out information that may be necessary. It starts to bring in new information that may have some recency bias that drives the AI agent in the wrong way. So it's a weird paradigm to get used to just select 8 models, delete them, because we would never, ever do that in any of our careers where maybe a couple columns are wrong, so we just delete 8 models. And it's a weird paradigm to get used to, but we truly do believe it is the fastest path forward with agentic development. The 4 non-negotiable principles that we learned along the way of whether AI agents are actually going to build high-quality production-grade code or just slop AI code that we all have seen. First, it needs to still be human-led. Our human experts are defining the what, the why, and the how of what we want built. The AE agents are just executing on our ideas. I still believe that humans are the experts until the AI overlords take us all over. I still think we need to remain in the driver's seat and have those checkpoints along the way. Purpose-built agents. As you saw, we have our whole team of agents that mirror the roles on our everyday teams. And so we truly do believe that if you just use generic AI, you're going to get generic code. We don't want generic code. I'm sure your organizations don't want generic code either. Third, context is king. As you saw, we rebuilt our whole process to feed our agents as much information as possible. So we feed them everything. Our meeting transcripts, our tech specs, all of our documentation and design guides. And so again, the goal is they have as much information at their fingertips as our experts do on our projects. And of course, the MCP as the accelerator. The DBT MCP is really what allows our agents to run autonomously. And I'm really excited to see some of these features come out over the next couple of years as DBT progresses that along. Now, if you haven't learned anything from today, I hope that's not the case, but I think this is the most important slide, is in order to build something great with agents, you need to know how to build it great without agents. So we truly do believe that we are experts in building high-quality DBT projects here at Mammoth Growth, and so we know what good looks like. We know what the output should look like when these agents are running. And so we can push back, and we can make sure that they go on the rails. And so I truly recommend that when you start to agentify work processes, make sure that you're all experts, because the agents are going to do whatever they want at the end of the day, and so you need to be able to push back. And finally, I have some call to action here for the group. First, reject the premise that you need to type to code. Again, I have not written a single line of code in over 6 months. I'm still writing specs, I'm still writing prompts, but I'm actually not manually developing my DBT models. AI can write it way faster than I could ever dream of typing. It can iterate on itself, it can do it parallel. So definitely get used to that paradigm as well. Consider where automation has the highest impact in your business, in your processes. If you remember back at the beginning, we said we've built an AI agent to remove unused columns from our lineage. Not that impactful, but having an agent that rewrites our business use case documents, that saves our consultants 4 to 6 hours every single week, that's extremely impactful. So understand where in the business, in the processes, this investment makes sense. And then again, I've said this a couple times, but build in human leadership from day one. Again, we remain in the driver's seat here. We want our experts driving these workflows. We just have the agents executing on them. And then arguably most important, start today. This is real, it's here today. DBT is increasingly allowing and writing all these new tools for us to leverage. I would absolutely just recommend everybody get their hands dirty and start developing, because I do believe that AI engineering is the path forward for analytics engineering. Awesome. Thank you for listening to me babble here today. I'm happy to take any questions, and if you don't find us here today, we'll be out on the floor, and then if you want to continue the conversation, we'll be out on LinkedIn as well.
Thanks, this is great. So you showed your team, your virtual team,
yeah.
Right? Did you target all that at once, or did you say, hey, we want to focus on the analytics engineer first?
Yeah, it definitely was piecemeal. We started with our architect because we definitely write detailed tech specs in our normal day-to-day process. So we said, can we help speed that along, and can we start to break this down into other tasks? So it started with the architect, and then it was the coder agent, and then we realized that they still did not have enough context, and they didn't understand the raw data that they were working with. So that's when we built the analyst agent. And then we said, well, we have to sit here and click yes, go, continue. So we built the orchestrator agent to help manage all that workflow. So it was definitely piecemeal.
Thanks.
Yep. Yeah.
How do you guys deal with? Oh, thanks. So we haven't started using MCP, and one of the concerns with clients is like, how do you guys get around access controls and giving access, LLMs full access to your data, and then do you use dedicated hosting or build it in house? Like, how does that work for the client?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was one of the first hurdles we had to get over, was the clients allowing, just the LLMs in general, and then all these other tools that we're bringing in as well. And so we started with using client-owned keys, so they felt a little bit more comfortable using their own LLM keys than us bringing theirs. The DBT MCP server that we built, so we actually did build our own DBT MCP just about a month before DBT released theirs. We have since switched to them. But it's really just about having that conversation with the clients, and a lot of these clients want AI, and so when we start to bring these initiatives to the table, they can get executive buy-in pretty quick once they see the speed and the value of it. So it's another access hurdle to get through, but a lot of these clients do want this, so yeah. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. Really interesting talk. What impact do you think that this will have on hiring going forward?
Sorry, what was it?
What impact will this have on hiring employees?
Oh, yeah, exactly. So it's really interesting. We see AI kind of, not to be controversial, but it reduces the need for junior engineers, right? So there's less on-ramps to getting new jobs out of college, right? And so we've actually moved to really only hiring and working with kind of these senior leaders, because we want our leaders to be able to run these agentic workflows, and you really need experience in analytics engineering and data engineering to do that. And so we're actually seeing that these high-ranking employees are even more valuable, and that's actually who we want to work with more, because they know what good looks like, they have the experience, and they can work with these agents a lot better than just giving a junior engineer this bazooka of a process to work with. So, yeah. Oh. Yeah, we've used a couple different ones. I can't give all the secret sauce away, but we did use some open source tools with Rue Code to kind of test some of this stuff. It is just a VS Code plugin you can get out there. But we have standardized on Claude and Cursor, because really when we go to a client, they may have Cursor license, so we have to adhere to that. We have others that adhere to Claude Code, and so we're really trying to make it as tool agnostic as possible. And then we have some in-house technology as well that we've built out to align with that. Yeah, I think there was a question over there.
Yeah, this was the same question, where you access the agent, if it's code editors or other places.
Could you say that again? Sorry.
Where do you actually access the agent? Is it only on the code editor, or do you build some agent that you can access in, I don't know, Slack, or where you can attribute some issues on Jira?
Yeah, all of these agents that we show, they run in the IDE. So with our developers, we do have developers that prefer VS Code or Cursor or any other IDE. So we want to make sure that our team members are using the tools they're comfortable with. We do have some other extraneous agents in Jira and Slack, but the development ones are in the IDE. So mainly VS Code.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How has this kind of process that you've built changed how your human team interacts and how your human team kind of rallies to solve problems?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's definitely a weird paradigm to get used to. We definitely see, obviously, we're delivering more value quicker. Our human teams are finding that we're actually outpacing our clients, so we're delivering so much for them to consume that they're like, well, great, these 30 models are built. Our backlog is still 10 dashboards filled before we can even start to look at this data. And so it's definitely freeing up a lot of time for our human experts to work on high initiatives or other high important initiatives, such as progressing our agents along further. So it's a weird thing to get used to, but we are moving faster and freeing up our time to do more impactful initiatives. Yeah.
Do you have like some kind of peer review process still, like in GitHub, and also human peer review, and do you have like some automatic checks like data diffs and stuff like this? Because when we do data, this is the stuff we want to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. So none of the code gets pushed to production without human review, right? We still want those human checkpoints along the way. So honestly, we can have some flags that allow the agent to push the PR and then we'll review it. We have some flags that they can't even push the PR, right? We want the human to review, hey, is this ready to even push the PR? Everything's still reviewed by human before it's moved to production. And then, I'm sorry, what was your second question?
Do you have that?
Oh, the data diffs, yeah. We used to use a tool called Datafold. I think they're here. But yeah, we still absolutely do that analysis. We do have our analyst agent that we do kind of check between staging and prod to make sure that it is up to par. And then obviously the new DBT feature of the data diffs is going to be highly used. So.
How are you dealing with production issues?
Production issues, we're kind of triaging that kind of like we used to, where we try to dive into what the exact issue is, but now we have the analyst agent and other agents to kind of help speed it along. But we still want right now we still have our humans really doing a lot of that heavy lifting just to get in there and make sure that the data is exactly as we're expecting for the client. So.
How are you tracking back the issue with the code that's being written by the AI agent?
Oh, how are we tracking the issue? A lot of what we do is working hand in hand with the client. So when they call out an issue, we're just logging in the backlog, and then we're, again, just kind of triaging it as we normally would. So I don't think we've revamped that process by any means, but it just happens a lot faster now that we have agents to help us do that data discovery to figure out what's going on there.
Thanks. Oh, sorry. Thanks for taking the time. You mentioned that specialization and increased context helps the outcomes that you get from the LLM. Do you have advice and resources in terms of what's the fine balance between just shoving a ton of context for it to perform better, or is it actually just always better the more context you give it?
That's a great question. The right context is always better, but if you just fill up your context window that the agent can't even really do anything, then obviously you're going to see that degradation pretty quick. And so it really is about getting the right context, which our process allows us to gather the right context with our business use case documents, our tech specs along the way, and then those meeting transcripts really kind of ground the agent to understand some of the peripheral conversations that are happening. And so it's absolutely the right context and not just as much context as possible.
Yeah. So you have multiple agents, right, that you talked about. Mm-hmm. So how do you communicate with them? The prompt, and I'm sure like underlying MCP reach out to those respective agents. So how would that choose the relevant agent? How is that happening inside?
Yeah, and that's a lot in the prompts that we've built, so the agent definitions, so it knows what tools it has at its disposal, it knows when to call the other agents. So a lot of that is in the prompting and how we are defining the agents. And of course we start to, I mean, the more agents you bring on, you start to see that degradation and maybe they're not calling the right agent or not calling the right MCP tool. So we still have to work through that, but it's all in the definition of the agents itself. So they know exactly what they can and when they should call them.
Just 2 more questions.
What are you working on next?
Yeah, great question. We're kind of working on the idea of an autonomy slider. So like if you think of a self-driving car, right? You have fully autonomous and then you have automated windshield wipers, right? Kind of on the end of the spectrum. And so we've started to break down, again, we had that list of tasks up at the beginning. So we've started to break down and automate each one of those tasks. So then the agent can call any of those tasks that it needs, or as we onboard new engineers or junior engineers, if we so choose, they have these very specific tools that they can leverage. And so it's really just kind of taking that next step of this fully automated and breaking it down into even more micro increments of automation that can then build up these puzzle pieces to full end-to-end automation.
Okay, that thing's me.
Contacts and then giving out to the agent, right? How do you know what form is the best form for agent to consume? Like, is that a text file? Should be good. Is it a transcript? Or is that an image? Like, what about the data model and all that, right?
Yeah, all of our context is stored in Markdown files, Markdown and JSON, mostly Markdown, but agents work very well with Markdown files. So everything we do, every transcript, every document we create gets converted to Markdown. Yep. Cool. Well, thank you all so much for listening, and hope to see you on the floor.